Hi guys, it's Rory here. Just wanted to leave a quick note to say that if you enjoyed last week's episode and want to keep up to date with the content that we release every week, please remember to follow or subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or whichever platform you're listening to us on. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify specifically, please also remember to leave us a review. It means a lot to us and does wonders for pushing our podcast in front of new listeners every week. Once you've done that, leave a comment on Spotify or come and join us on X, BlueSky, or Instagram and let us know that you've left a review. It means a whole lot to us and we'll make sure that we get in touch with you to say thank you. Thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back to the Football Heritage podcast. I'm your host, Rory Bryce, and this week I'm joined by Justin Walley. Justin, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on with me tonight.
Likewise, it's a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on.
Not at all. Many of our listeners will probably already be aware of who you are, Justin. Justin is the comms director and the assistant manager of the Marshall Islands national team, who at the time of recording played their very first international fixtures just over a week ago, which is an incredibly tremendous and historic occasion. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you on to talk us through everything about those fixtures, but everything about the Marshall Islands national team as well. Building this national team, trying to really pull all of these kind of different identities into one focus. I think that's going to be what's really interesting for me at this point, but also, you know, things like logistics, player recruitment, and everything around that as well. That's really everything we're going to be talking about tonight, and I hope our listeners get something really good out of that. I think they'll be aware of everything that the Marshall Islands done last week in terms of the historic fixtures and the journey up until that, as it's been fairly widely publicised, especially on social media. So I'm hoping that this gives them, and myself to be fair, a little bit more of an insight into how that actually took place and came about. But just before we start things properly, Justin, could you tell me and our listeners a little bit about yourself, the types of things that you do within the Marshall Islands and in your personal life as well, and your journey to becoming the assistant manager of the national team?
Sure. Well, I'm currently in York. I I woke up in North Wales. I've been in Liverpool, and I'm now in York today. Yeah, and a week ago I was in the US preparing for the second game. I'm a trip leader for a tourism company, so that's my main job these days. The job that actually pays the bills, shall we say, and also helping with the Marshall Islands project, been involved in that for 2.5 years. Yeah, my background, I've worked in tourism, I've worked in journalism, a bit of teaching. Yeah, coaching, I started off really, I suppose, in Latvia was the big one. I helped found Riga United Football Club, and if you go back to 2007, we founded the club. Became a serious thing sort of 2011, 2012. So yeah, coached with the men's team. That became National League, so Latvian League 2. I helped found a women's club, which we finished. I did about 3 seasons with them. We got a bronze medal in the Latvian Premier League. Did a little bit of time with FK Alliance. They asked me to go down and help them, so it's a second league club in Latvia. And then from there, I went to marshallislands in Zimbabwe, where I was the national team manager for Matabeleland when we went to the CONIFA World Cup in 2018. Coaching wise then, not too much since then. I played out my final couple of years playing in the Latvian second and third divisions, quite late in life, shall we say. And then, the last game I was 50.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fair play.
And so I concentrated on my career, as they say. That was a bit of an exaggeration. And then a little bit of coaching. I worked with the Craig Bellamy Foundation in Sierra Leone in 2013. Just did a couple of months out in Sierra Leone. Coached a wee bit in Bosnia. I live in Bosnia now. So I coached with my friend Igor Joksimovic at his academy in Trebinje. And and then bits and bobs in football. I worked with CONIFA. I was the African president for CONIFA. Yeah, I worked at Euro 96 many, many moons ago. I was the assistant director for the city of Nottingham. And then I'm trying to think what else. It's been a bit of a weird journey. And then lots of non-football stuff, which is not going to be particularly interesting for people, but a big passion for travel, which is taking me all over the world as well, I'd say.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. It comes out in the work that you've done, and I think especially your work with Matabeleland and Conifa is going to be quite interesting when we get into the discussion a bit later on. We'll pull on some of that experience. It's always interesting to hear the different experiences that people have, and the wealth of experience that you have is absolutely incredible. Just across the board, not even within football and tourism and travel as well, I think is very, very important for this when we come on to our first point of topic, I think, really about the Marshall Islands themselves. So for our listeners who don't know, the Marshall Islands are an archipelago out in Micronesia, reasonably remote. I think probably most widely known out with football as being a nuclear test site during World War II.
Yeah.
And I think out with that, many people would probably be forgiven for not knowing very much else about the atolls and the different islands that actually make up the archipelago chain. But of course, within the world of sport recently, they've been really making waves from really 2020 when the Marshall Islands Soccer Federation was founded. And this is what's really kind of kick-started the journey to getting the Marshall Islands national team up and running. But I mean, the Marshall Islands just have such a fascinating history. Obviously, you've got the Marshallese people, the indigenous people who live there, but there's been a huge number of other peoples and a number of other cultures who've come and went across the islands throughout the years.
Yeah, you might know more than me on this subject. There was German occupation, Japanese occupation, US occupation. It was part of the US. It's of course an independent country now. And naturally, where it is in the world, there were different peoples from that region who would have mixed over the centuries as well. See, yes, I think anyone's forgiven for not knowing where it is. When Lloyd contacted me, Lloyd Owers, he contacted me, a friend of mine, and said, I'm the new technical director of the Marshall Islands. I had heard of them, at least. But I must confess, I did get the map out immediately and try to work out where exactly they are in the world. I knew it was in the Pacific, but I couldn't quite place it. It's difficult, isn't it? Because there's a big bank of sea there, and you can't pin nations out of that map very easily. So, I mean, it's fair to say it's the middle of nowhere, or I sometimes say it's the middle of everywhere.
That's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah, I think so. I think you can put it like that. It is, it feels like the middle of nowhere, but actually when you're travelling there, it's the middle of everywhere, because I travelled out there via the US and Hawaii. Lloyd went out there via Japan and Guam, and then Matt and Lloyd went out one time and they went via Australia and up that route. So yeah, it's a low population, lots and lots of islands, but like all these places, it's got its people that are very proud of where they are in the world and who they are, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. It comes back to that identity point that I mentioned earlier as well. Proud of their place, aware of their place, but fiercely and proudly an independent and incredibly unique people as well, in an incredibly unique place. For somewhere so remote, people often look at the sort of sporting institutions within these places, and for that part of the world, and bearing in mind the Pacific Ocean is a significant part of the world, a huge part of the world, but it's probably more affiliated with rugby more than anything throughout the majority of the islands, Fiji, etc. But there has been quite a strong presence of football within the Marshall Islands. Some islands have had their own leagues. There have occasionally been inter-island leagues through history, so there has at least been some presence of football in the islands and an awareness of the sport, as there will be anywhere, but maybe not. People often have a perception that it would maybe just be like amateur level, if that, or just people kind of kicking a ball about. But actually, that there were football associations and organisations who were trying to make the game more strong and the presence of the game stronger within this nation.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's so separated that when you live in a nation where I don't know, you've got to travel from England to Germany to another island with limited resources. You can understand how places have almost completely different existences from others, if you see what I mean. Yeah, it's important to remember as well, the US bases, they had people that would have played soccer, would have had better resources and facilities. So that's partly an explanation for that side of things. If I talk about Majuro, I mean, I went to Majuro. I spent 3 weeks out there myself. There was literally nothing there. So I was there about 18 months ago. And so I went out for about 3 weeks. And we just finished the new facility, the Olympic type facility, the athletics track and all that. So there's a grass pitch in the middle of that. But it's only recently that's been available for use. But when I went there, yeah, literally you've got the only pictures we had were these basketball courts we've been commandeering and putting pop-up goals on. And those pop-up goals are not, yeah, because these are not 2-minute jobs. Some of them are sort of 10 minutes, twizzle this together and
Jumpers for goalpost type situations.
jumpers for goalposts. Yeah, yeah. I mean, on occasion, yeah. But
Yeah.
no, it's just been the reality of the situation that if we talk more broadly, there's just not been proper organised football or soccer. There's not been a governing body. And 2020, we had Shem Levi started the federation, and these next steps have come from that. It's come from Lloyd Owers, Matt Webb, and then myself joining, and the three of us working towards this vision and project we've had. And then lots and lots and lots of people have joined us, especially recently. We've got lots of people on board with the journey of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, the support's been absolutely incredible. The journey's been incredibly important as well. You know, the Sweeper are probably one of the best sort of media outlets, independent media outlets that cover this type of thing, and they're always talking about the different island nations that haven't yet got a national team, and the Marshall Islands was one of the last. There is one more. I think it's Nauru that's the last one that doesn't have a national team or something along those lines. But I think a lot of football fans, particularly in Europe, will take that idea for granted, particularly people who don't know very much about CONIFA. It's, this idea that, oh, well, if you're a country, you have to have a national team. So how can't you? So it is a very privileged position to come from. But then when we're talking about the CONIFA side of things, we're more often than not, we're talking about people and cultures who don't have defined nations, or don't have nations defined by borders or land. So you get into all these different dynamics of statehood and what it means to be a national team and so on and so forth. But in 2020, these kind of infrastructures started to be put in place in the Marshall Islands with the founding of the Soccer Federation. And I'm guessing that's where the journey would have officially started, but there would have been a lot of planning and a lot of roadmaps kind of going out before the official founding and the official launch of the Soccer Federation.
The thing is, you've got to remember the timing of that. It's 2020, we'll all be familiar with that. So there wasn't a great deal in place, and then anything that was in place, it just didn't happen really. So this is hence why Lloyd, for example, was talking to Shem. Shem had been looking for technical director, and Lloyd equally was looking for an exciting project to get fully involved in. In all honesty, if you think about the timing, we're talking back end of 2022, he was approved in that role. And beginning of 2023, when we sort of officially launched all the social media and all that stuff. If you think about that, it's coming out at the end of COVID, it really, isn't it? And it's realistic then to drive on with it.
100%, I get where you're coming from. And of course, that was probably just one of the challenges, one of the logistical and practical challenges that you faced when you first founded, to try and get all of these things sorted, on top of, the challenges that some of our listeners of our podcast will already know from other people speaking about trying to create national teams that already exist. And, there's a huge amount of them before you even consider trying to get into FIFA. Sometimes it can be supported from the off, and I understand that. It's depends who you're in touch with and who your network is, but it's an incredibly difficult thing, and it doesn't just happen overnight.
To give you a perspective on where we were at the beginning of 2023, there wasn't even really equipment. If you talk about Maduro, yeah, there were a few people playing on Quadriline, but in Maduro there was nothing really, no pitches, not really any equipment. There was a half dozen people who sometimes had a kickabout. I think that really that's as far as it went. One of the things that we organised was to get all this equipment out to the islands, which is very expensive. It's a logistical nightmare to get anything out there, frankly, and and then to have organised sessions, because it's all very well to have a session where you've got 10 people and then the next week there's no set time for it. It all sort of fizzles out. So to get that up and running, the really important, the first time that Lloyd went out after about, I think it was 5 months or something. And then he did these organised sessions. So he got lots of people down. He did kids sessions, open kids sessions for many kids that never kicked a ball before in their lives.
Brilliant.
Football is not in the schools. It's not in any schools. It's not in the PE. There's no goal nets anywhere, just to kind of put this in perspective. And from that, the regular training sessions started to take place with an adult group. So we're talking about a dozen people, really, tops 20, sometimes 6 or 8. That's the point where we're really talking about. And then all the social media side of things, that stuff we can do at distance. That's myself. I've got quite a lot of experience of doing Twitter, in particular with Riga United in Latvia and Marshallislands, and knowing how that works and how you interest people, telling people your story, being quite transparent about it and telling an honest story and kind of inviting people to be on the journey with you. I think that engages people. And, if people are interested in it, you reply literally to any person that's not the nutcases necessarily, but any genuine person that's interested. Doesn't matter if they have 2 followers, you get involved, and funnily enough, these are the people who start to buy shirts when you sell them and this sort of thing. So in our case, there come this point where we need income. How are we going to get income? Because the federation is just a bunch of people, right? There is no money, there is no funding. So how do you finance what you're doing? Well, you finance it, you do crowdfunding, you find some sponsors, but that's not easy. It's not easy. There's so many worthwhile causes. Frankly, there's more worthwhile causes because there's, this baby's got cancer and they need an operation. How do you say that we need the money more than them? We don't, and that's very difficult to justify. And with all the mediums there are now, there's thousands and thousands of stories out there, right? So it's difficult to get that kind of sponsorship. We were very fortunate, for example, when I went out for the 3 weeks and we did the first ever kids cup, the first ever cup competition. We had the Ratak Cup and got lots of sort of mini sponsors, people who follow independent football, who gave 50 quid here, 100 quid here, 200 quid there, and it was amazing. That covered the cost of us running that tournament and even having awards and all the food on the day and things like that. But there comes a point you need more. You need, because £5,000 doesn't stretch. You need 20,000, you need 30, 40,000. So that's where we started to sell, these beautiful. There we go. He's plugging it already. Plugging these beautiful shirts. Yeah, having the competition. I had an experience with that with Marshallislands with Connie for World Cup, and we had Paddy Power with us at the time. But we ran a competition and got a lot of attention. And you engage people. You say, please, you give us your designs, and it will be chosen from the public. We're not going to a shirt manufacturer and asking them, or a famous designer. So we do that. We get lots of people engaged, interested in it. The fact that we were the last nation on earth was a good sell for people. It was very interesting. That did get interest. We were fortunate. We got lots of media, especially British media, because of the fact that there was 3 English guys heavily involved. So we got lots of BBC and Sky News, this sort of thing. But then you start selling the shirts, and if you've got a margin on a shirt, a respectable margin, and you start to sell 1,000 or 2,000 shirts, that actually starts to become a reasonable amount of money to enable you to send coaches out. So we send coaches out, they do coach education, because you've got PE teachers who don't know football, right? You can't have football in schools if the PE teachers don't know how to coach football, right? They don't have to be Klopp or somebody, but you need somebody at least knows the rules, or the fact there's offside or whatever, or if you're playing futsal, how futsal works. So we started to raise money like that, and we put the emphasis on futsal because we don't have the football pitches. So that was the obvious way to start developing it, really.
It makes sense 100%. And I think, again, this kind of comes back to the idea of taking things for granted. You've said so many things there, there weren't even nets. It's such a benign concept to, like, us people who are from the UK, where there's at least a football pitch and goal frames in almost every town and every village. But, when your association doesn't have money, there's no infrastructure whatsoever, even down to that level where the people who, should be educating people on this sport don't know the rules. It just kind of blows these ideas even about, having training camps, picking players, scouting players. How do you do that when there aren't any? Do you know what I mean? Like, ultimately, this is what it boils down to. It's a crazy thought.
Yeah, so, in terms of the vision, the obvious one was, and the one that's easiest to get people to sort of be engaged and buy into, is we're the last nation to play our first ever game, right? So That's a big focus. But to get to that point, there are so many steps. It's a hotel with 6 stories, and you got to get up. You got to get up 3 stories before you get to that point. The 6th floor is getting into a confederation and being part of FIFA and World Cup qualifiers and whatever. But the first steps are equipment. And then it's people who can actually do some coaching. It's organised sessions. It's transporting people to the sessions. What do you do when some of the players live 20 miles away from the session on an island with almost no public transport? Where do you play? What happens if it's a Sunday and everybody wants to go to church? And that's the priority over soccer. How do you work around that? And then how do you get it into the schools? How do you get the local authorities, the government, the ministries interested in what you're doing to start supporting you? And the things I spoke about previously, how do you raise money? How do you get coaches? How do you pay for coaches to go from the UK or wherever, spend some time there? How do those coaches get enough time off to afford to go out there and work for free for 3 weeks or leave their families? So it goes on. So, yeah, going back to the idea of a first national team game, that's obviously some way down the road. You don't want to leave it too far down the road because people lose interest, you lose momentum on the project, and you're not going to get anywhere. So you've kind of got to set a realistic time frame for when you can do these things. So I think for us, we got to the point where the boys we'd got a group of futsal players playing regularly. We had the futsal cup last year, which I was working, unfortunately, so I couldn't go overseas for that. Then you start to say, well, yeah, these lads haven't played 11-a-side, but we've got 7-8 players here that we can look to put in the squad when we play a match. Then we've got some players. We go to Kwajalein. We play inter-island against other people. We see some more players. Then we've got a Lloyd supported by a couple of people building up a database of players with Marshallese ancestry who are primarily playing in the States, or we find them in places like Hawaii perhaps, or even in Europe. Remember, there's some German heritage, there's some Japanese heritage as well. There's US bases, so you can have guys who've been on US bases for 10 years or their families have stayed out there, so they qualify to play for you. And so it goes on. So you start to look at that. But then where do you play in international? How do you convince a team to come and play you? And if you want to do it properly, how do you convince national teams to come and play you? That's a big ask. They're not going to turn up in the Marshall Islands on half a promise, are they? So you start to say, well, look, we're going to play it in the US. You spend a lot of time working on finding somewhere in the US. You look at the Marshallese community in the US. There's this big community in Arkansas. And again, another 50 steps to a point where you're talking to nations like FIFA nations like Guam, US Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands, Turks and Caicos, all these different people. 3 of them say they're going to play you and agree to play you, but then you kind of think, oh, how much is this going to cost? Well, you're on the back of bits of paper and you're going, that's about, even if we do it on the, cheap but professional, it's 100 grand or it's 200 grand. Oh my God, where do we find that from? Let's assume we get the sponsors and go with it, fly on it. Yeah, and so it goes on. Announce the tournament. That's all great. You can announce these things, but then you got to start paying for hotel bills. You got to start buying all the flights. You got to buy flights for the players. You got to look at visas for some people. You've got to give the US Virgin Islands enough trust that they can go ahead with this and buy flights. And I'm tiring myself out trying to explain it. I wasn't involved in half of that. Matt Webb, for example, he was phenomenal. He was doing 90% of these things himself. But yeah, it's a big, long, complicated journey. But we're there. We've done it, right? I know you're going to discuss some of that, but we've got to those points.
Exactly, and I think it's good because that CONIFA experience comes into things that you've just mentioned there, the logistics of actually trying to put all this together. Asking people to come to where you are and play against you. It can be big, and again, it's just something that we take for granted. And of course, having to basically advocate and fight for acknowledgement and for justification for these fixtures to happen isn't an easy thing, and I don't think people realise that can actually be quite difficult, especially if you're a nation that either doesn't have a national team and an infrastructure, or is, for example, a new nation that's just up and coming. But I mean, you said it there, so let's talk about it just now. obviously the steps were taken. There was a lot of them, huge logistical challenges that you've managed to overcome. And then last week, you finally made history in playing your very first international game.
It was, it's less. What we were talking at the start, 1 week ago, we hadn't played our second game yet, and I'm back almost worked a week. I can't quite work it all out. It all felt like a crazy dream. I mean, I finished up work on a Friday night and a Saturday morning. I was in I was in my training kit, coach's kit for Marshall Islands, flying out on international duty to the US, meeting up with a group of players, most of whom I'd never met before. Even a couple of coaches or backroom staff I'd never met before. People that I'd been talking to on things like this, on WhatsApp and stuff for a couple of years, but never actually physically met before. A couple of people I've known for a long time that I hadn't seen for maybe 8 years, who I met up with as well. And going into thinking, what is this going to be? And what's the group going to be like? What's the environment going to be like? So, yeah, I suppose I think it was 20 hours door to door. I arrived and got picked up at Northwest Arkansas, went to the lovely facility, what was it called, Mount Sequoia in Fayetteville, a lovely part of the world, by the way. And went into the coach's accommodation, and Lloyd and Matt were there. And then when I met some players, had dinner, and they were like, "Right, we're going out for the night. We're going down." And I'm like, "No. I'm absolutely exhausted. My head's spinning up as it is. Meet the players. Hello." And we went out for a few drinks, and and next thing is it's the first night, and I'm sort of going to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is like, what is it for me? It's 9 o'clock in the morning, right? And I haven't had any sleep, and they were like, after 3 hours, we're getting up and getting on with it all. So then, I'm getting up, I'm going to breakfast, and then meeting all the players, and then we start having all the serious stuff, first training sessions or whatever. And it's already very strange, but then you've got to flip into all the professional side if you've got to be professional about it. And doing first training sessions, having those first sit-down meetings with the players. Big part of what we did was we knew we only had about 5 or 6 training sessions, tops, over the whole week, including for the second game. So we knew we were very limited with that, but we knew we had a fair bit of time in terms of sitting down with the lads, showing them stuff, talking to them about stuff. So we had to utilise a lot of that. We had the meals together 3 times a day. We had stretching sessions in the swimming pool, these kinds of things. But it's so important to get the mindset right with this bunch of young lads. They weren't all young. One of the goalkeepers was 43. He's even I'm older than him, but more towards my age group. But a lot of the lads, the youngest was 15, but a lot of the lads around 20, 22, 23. So we had a first training session, and I'll be absolutely honest with you, it was kind of what I expected. It was a little bit better technically, but there was some of the lads, and I'll just talk about myself. I did say to the other coaches, we're in serious trouble here. Unless we pull, rabbits out of hats, and the lads pull rabbits out of their own hats, frankly. We've got to work miracles, and they've got to do some miracle working on themselves, kind of thing. Well, a few days later, we saw this movement towards improvement already in the second, third, fourth sessions. We all saw the look of terror on their faces when the other national teams turned up. When Turks and Caicos and US Virgin Islands turned up in their full kits, consistently athletic, we're talking about professional footballers, the look of fear on some of the lads' faces of, oh, right, this is a real thing, isn't it? How the heck do we compete with these guys? So then you've got to get these young lads, you've got to get the fear out of them. So you've got to say, fear's okay. This is what it's all about. You can't play without fear, but ultimately, they're human beings. You've got to believe in yourselves. You've got to do your best, blah, blah, blah. And so it goes on. And you've got that week to get to the point where you're ready to play that first game. And then you pray it's not a 20-0, that you are competitive, right?
But you were competitive. And the thing is, though, it's, you need to get on top of the psychology of it. Like, you're absolutely right. Like, it's the first ever Marshall Islands international fixture. There's going to be that pressure on them. They're going to be aware of that pressure. But it's like you said, it's maybe not going to hit them in full until they're actually on the field facing their opponent, and then the realisation hits that these guys have many years of professional football under their belts. But you need to snuff that out, and you need to get on top of the psychology of it as well.
One thing, the bonding's on several levels. So, yeah, we're the first ever Marshall Islands team. We've come from lots of different backgrounds. We've got these foreign guys, a lot of foreign guys helping and what have you. But there was also things like the religious aspect to it. So most of the guys are very religious. They're very grateful for positive things in their lives. So as a group, we prayed. So we prayed before training sessions, prayed before the matches. This is going to sound very strange to a lot of people listening, but we gather as a group. Yeah, we said there's going to be some people here who are not religious, but on the whole, you'd have us gather in a circle, and you'd have a couple of the young lads just really say, "We're grateful for this opportunity. Please, bless us that nobody gets injured, and this and that. We represent the nation." And whether you believe in God or not, that is a very bonding experience that actually gives you an extra layer of sense of what it's about, and also a sense of, if we give 100% but we fail, that was how it was meant to be. So we had elements like that to it, which really helped us develop as a group. It helped the coaches as well. But we had an incredibly emotionally mature group of young men who were able to adapt to everything we threw at them. There was no egos. You can't believe it, really, that there wasn't even one person in the group that was playing up or thinking they were too good or better. Every single person wanted to learn, was respectful. You'd be walking out of dinner and one of the young lads would come up to you and say, "Listen, coach, I'm so grateful to you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for giving your time this last couple of years." I mean, those people might think these things, but they don't say these things. And that's the kind of emotional intelligence we had in the group, which then built into this psychology as we went on. So that when we played the first match, we went and watched one match before it. And I think there was a bit of confidence that we weren't going to be a 30-0 maybe, right? We had a little bit of a behind closed doors game where some of the lads did really well as well. And I think going into that first game, I don't think anybody seriously was saying we were going to win it. There's always that chat. You have to go into a game and kind of talk in that way. But we were never going to park the bus. We were going to try and play. We'd done a lot of analysis on the other teams. I mean, we had like 5 guys doing analysis for us for weeks. So we were really, really prepared. We had a full-time physio, this kind of stuff with us, a team manager. We had a guy, Woody, that was doing all the stuff locally. So we had about 20 staff on top of everything. And I think when we went into that game, the guys were like, we can put in a respectful performance. And I'm conscious of the fact I've been talking non-stop for ages, but we went 1-0 down after 3 minutes, I think, in the first game. Bit of a slip from the keeper, and then a fantastic finish. The guy just took the opportunity, lobbed him from sort of 30 yards. And then we held on till, because then you're thinking, oh my gosh, what's this going to be? And then we held on and we conceded a penalty not long before half time. So you go in at 2-0. And, I looked at the guys and I said, you look disappointed. Are you disappointed? And they're like, yeah. I said, well, how far have we come in a week? You're 2-0 down to a FIFA nation at half time and you're upset. All of you, without exception, you're upset. You feel that you it's not fair. So, we're confident now that this group can develop and be a really good team. And we hit the post in the first 30 seconds of the second half, and lose 4-0. And 4-0 is absolutely exceptional. That's like a 10-0 win for us, because your first ever game, as you will well know, most of these nations that play a first game will lose 20, 30, 40-0.
Yeah, exactly. And then they managed to follow up and go on better by only losing 3-2, scoring the first international goal. First 2 international goals. And the thing is that you could have easily drawn or won that game as well.
Yeah, you got hindsight now. did we leave ourselves a bit open? Did we're quite the opposite of parking the bus. We were sort of said we can go with this,
Gung ho.
which is kind of seems quite crazy, right? But again, conceded fairly early, and then 2-0 down. They played the same ball over the top of us on the angle, got behind us. One of our centre halves was crying after the game because he felt he was personally responsible for that happening and let us down. And I tried to explain to him that's the whole team, that's the whole team shape. That's how the coaches set it up. We left it open. The midfielders lost the ball in possession, and they did this quick turnover and ball over the top that they'd obviously got lined up for us. They'd done the homework on us. But that's happened, and then we score this lovely goal with Josiah. Lovely teamwork, great goal. We all go absolutely mad. We all went running into the corner, all jumped on top of each other. I'm surprised there weren't any injuries. It was about a 40-man pile on top of each other. And then, unfortunately, they score again quite quickly. We then change a few things around. We realised we're going to be dead and buried unless we change things. We didn't manage to get the change quite in time. The ball never went out of play before the third goal, so we were in the process of making that change. And the third goal, you know what I'm telling you, how this happens in football. You're waiting for an opportunity to change it, and it's 3-1 when we can change it. And then really you're sort of saying, well, you're going into half time at 3-1. So similar situation to the first game. What I said personally to the guys was that I think you're capable of scoring 3 or 4 goals here against this team. And if we've made the right decisions about defensively, about how we change things around, you can still get a result, right? So they go out and we score. We score a second goal. We get a penalty. We score it. They get a penalty. They miss. And then it's all us, because then everyone believes that we're going to score this. And every single player in that squad is playing. 20 guys have played. So you've got the guys who have never played 11-side football before on the pitch. Right? All of them are playing. Yeah. Right? Well, not 20 at once, but that would be a bit unfair. But the guys who only ever played futsal are on the pitch. They've never played an 11-side match before. You've got a couple of young lads who, 1 week ago, he'd said to me they could play an 11-side match. I'd have laughed privately about it. They've gone on and just been unbelievable. We've had a penalty, a turn down, I don't know what it was, 5 minutes from the end, and the linesman said to me afterwards, we were shouting to the referee that it's a penalty. He didn't hear us. You know, if he scores it, it's 3-3, right? And it's right till the last whistle. It's one of those, we're all still thinking that we're going to do it, and then the final whistle goes. But you know what? It doesn't matter, because we won as soon as we turned up at the tournament, even if we did lose 20-0. But, you know, we've exceeded, everyone involved has exceeded expectations on and off the pitch. You know, we've made a nation proud. We made lots of grandmothers proud of their grandkids playing, and I had Marshallese people coming up to me and saying thank you very much for what you've done for our nation. They didn't say the team, they said for our nation, which is just, I got goosebumps when a couple of them said that to me. I just almost cried, you know, so.
It's interesting how that comes full circle, though. It's like you said about bringing people on the journey with you. And obviously, you know, you would have recognised it yourself, and obviously you'll have tunnel vision from doing the training and working with the players, but at the end of the day, by being the assistant manager of a team that's representing a nation, you are bringing an entire nation along with you, whether you like it or not. And whether or not maybe they even want to be involved in it, you know, so it's nice how that kind of comes full circle. And, you know, just, it's an absolutely incredible journey to be that worried after the first training session to then going and putting in the performance of their lives. I really like that analogy that you mentioned about, you know, at half time they're disappointed. And it's just that belief, that connection, those bonds that they've built that have led that to happen. It's an incredible sense of belief that they get from actually being out on the pitch and being able to show themselves that they can do it, I think.
I don't know if it was said to the boys after the game, because believe it or not, 10 minutes after the game finished in the change rooms, I had to run to the airport. I had to get a lift to the airport to fly out immediately to go back to work. I had to be at work the next morning in London. So I just did a little speech thanking them and saying how proud I was of them, and sort of mentioning some of the backroom staff rather than the coaches. But what I wanted to say, which I kind of left to the coaches, we won a half of football. I mean, I don't know if anyone sort of noticed this with all the chaos, but we won the second half. There's always steps, isn't there? It's your first goal, your first clean sheet, it's your first draw, but it's your winning your first half of football as well. There's another one of the boxes to tick. So that's another one of the achievements from all of this. And then engagement with the crowd when the game's finished, they were over. It reminds me of my time at Matabeleland. All the boys they weren't applauding from 10 yards away. They were up in the stands. They were signing autographs. They were having selfies. They were hugging people. We were out there 10 minutes. It was a beautiful thing. And yeah, I don't know. It's all a bit of a haze. It's all a bit of a beautiful dream. And by the way, we got documentary camera crews running around in the middle of all this, which I haven't told you about. So. They're filming all this. We've got media wanting to do interviews. You got young guys who, like I said, never really played football before. Suddenly, international football is doing international media. So, yeah.
It's crazy stuff, but it's been an incredible journey, and there's a lot of things that have made this happen. But I want to bring it back to something that you mentioned before you went on. The act of praying before matches, and you said it might sound strange, but it's very common, particularly in Muslim countries and other countries that don't practice Christianity as well. It's one of these intangible things, and like you said, it might sound strange to a lot of our listeners, but these types of intangible spiritual things can be huge. They can be real sources of uplifting and empowerment, especially before matches. And this is the kind of thing that I'm really curious about, is when we're talking about the Marshall Islands, there's a lot of things we can look back in the history of the nation that are, kind of huge parts of history, particularly surrounding the world wars. But, when you're talking about things like spirituality, there's things there that you need to build an identity around related to the national team as well. And that, for me, is about using the heritage of the Marshall Islands. And the heritage of the Marshall Islands is the heritage of a number of people across the world. So how do you actually tap into those heritages to build a national team identity that represents everyone who can call themselves Marshallese?
I think you can apply this to we live in different times. An English team is very different to an English team from 30, 40 years ago, never mind 100 years ago. There's that layer to it. We've got guys, for example, who's got a Solomon Islands background, but he's lived in the Marshall Islands nearly all his life, right? So he would qualify to play for us, but he's got a different background. His family got a different background. It's like having someone, let's say, with Indian heritage who's playing for England, or Nigerian heritage. When they're home with the grandmother, it's quite a different thing. They've grown up perhaps in a very, very English, very British thing. So you've got to make it very inclusive, and I don't mean in a superficial way or trying to tick boxes superficially about inclusivity. I mean an environment where everyone feels kind of happy and can express who they are as people, as footballers. So we had guys who are quiet. We had guys who really like playing up, having a good old laugh. That's also important. It's not just what's your religion, what's your educational background, what have you. It's all those things. If some guys could speak, they put them in front of the group, they put them in front of media, they've got no problem speaking. Other guys, can't speak. That's quite difficult, by the way, on a training pitch, because you've got guys who will not shout because that's not normal for them to shout. So, I'm shouting at guys who don't like being shouted at, telling them to shout, because we need that. We need that as part of our game. But you've got to balance these things. You can't expect him to be shouting like a Scottish guy or an English guy would shout in pub football, for example. Yeah, I'm giving you quite a broad answer to it. But if I explain, it's a bit like that, and you are making up much of it as you go along, because you're being psychologists. You're trying to understand what works for the lads. But again, I think you're fortunate you've got an emotionally intelligent group. Part of that's been in the selection process, I suppose, in terms of how they've dealt with the opportunity. The fact they've even turned up, because not everybody's going to even turn up, right? I mean, one thing we did is Marshallese tend to be very laid back about life, right? So if you've got a meeting at 5:45 on a Monday evening to discuss tactics. They might not all be there on time. So rather than having financial fines, we had a system where anybody late for the meeting had to sing to everyone. So
It's brilliant.
and that worked wonders. Believe it or not, we had a couple of singers and no one was ever late again.
That's phenomenal. That is how you create inclusivity, though. That's how you create a welcoming environment that taps into local cultures and customs. Though I think, like, people across the world are obviously different. I think people forget that, though, is that when someone who's not from the background or culture goes to coach in another country, you need to be able to look at these different customs to be able to understand the people that you're actually going to be coaching and working with on a daily basis, and being able to take these shared experiences and shared heritages and turning them into an identity for what is quite a unique melting pot of an island is really challenging as well, but is incredibly rewarding, and you find that people actually resonate with it quite strongly when it's done properly.
I think when we made the announcement about who the coaches were, I think there was a bit of this is a bit of cronyism going on, because people like Lloyd and Justin are doing the coaching, and these are the same guys who have been doing a lot of the stuff from the start. Well, the point was really, because Lloyd was the technical director, we had a conversation about bringing in famous coaches. We could have found famous coaches who would have come in and just done it for the tournament. But I said to Lloyd, my feeling is that you should be national team manager, you're the technical director, you're the guy that's recruited everyone, you've been out there 3 times, you know almost all the lads, you've given some of the lads the first ever coaching session. So we all knew, most of the core of the coaches, we knew the lads, and then the other coaches who come in got bags of experience, or the right personality types to be involved in it. So there's that as well. It's just understanding the group, because we understood. If you've been to the Marshall Islands, it helps. If you brought in Pep Guardiola, but he'd never been to the Marshall Islands and he'd never met any of the guys, would he have been able to work with them? Now he'd been incredibly better than us in certain regards, but I'm not sure that he would have been the best suited for what we were trying to do, if you see what I mean. So it's very important that we had Tony, for example. He's our futsal coach on the island. He's with that group of guys every week. So we had all these different people that could understand the islands, the people, or aspects of it. Even the Marshallese guys, some of them in the US, they've never lived in the Marshall Islands, but they're part of a Marshallese community. So they come from a different perspective of what it is to be Marshallese. So perhaps in a way, having so many different kinds of people just gave us the opportunity to create our own identity, our own unique identity, if you see what I mean.
100%. See what you mean. One of my last questions for you is, within the identity that you've created around and for the national team, what does it mean to be Marshallese?
Well, I kind of feel slightly Marshallese, if you know what I mean. Part of this, spent a little bit of time out there being involved in this very historic event. I can't tell you what it feels like to be Marshallese. That's not possible for me. I can have my sense of what I think it is, but I think that's different for every individual. But I do think that this sense of one of the things is no one ever knows, if I'm Marshallese, nobody ever knows where I'm from, what my country is like, what people look like, what anything about the place, what the name of the capital is, what people eat, anything, right? So being Marshallese is being unknown, is being misunderstood, is being invisible, I think. So this is an opportunity to put the nation on the map. I'm sure if you now Google the Marshall Islands, soccer is one of the first things that's going to come up. It's a happy story, right? If I remember when I was with Matabeleland, if you Googled Matabeleland before the CONIFA World Cup, it was all about the genocide that took place in Zimbabwe. Within a couple of years, when you Googled, yes, those stories are there, but it was lots of good, happy stories about who are Matabeleland, why they're at the CONIFA World Cup. These guys dance and sing before matches, and everyone loves them, and here's some of their individual stories, and this is where they're from. So, you put your country on a map in a very positive way. You make people aware of you. So I think that's what we've succeeded with. Yesterday, 2 of the guys were on CBS. 2 of the players were on CBS in the US. a huge audience. I mean, I saw one of the social media posts. It had like, I don't know, 5,000 retweets or something crazy. So you got these two young guys a week ago hadn't even played their second game, and they're on CBS doing look like they've been doing media for the last 20 years, sort of thing, and giving such a good impression of the team, where they're from, and them as young athletes. So what a wonderful opportunity this is for all of us.
It's a confidence that having two international caps must bring to make you go on TV and behave like that without any media training. But I think that's spot on. I think without people of Marshallese descent will know what it's like to be Marshallese. But when you do something like be involved in such a historic occasion as building a football team around them, we know football can do so many things for so many different people around the world because it's a form of representation. And in the case of Matabeleland, as you said there, it can also be a form of reappropriation and repatriation as well for many people. It's an incredibly powerful thing, especially when we're talking about nations like the Marshall Islands or different Kanifa nations as well. And these are the types of things that give people empowerment, they give people confidence, and it's the types of things that can give them hope as well. It's just an incredible thing to be able to do, to give a nation representation on a stage like that. But I'm quite conscious of your time for now, Justin. I'm quite conscious that you've travelled literally all over the world within the space of a week. I mean, lastly, the only thing I really want to ask you is what the plans are for the future now that you've got the first two matches under your belt.
We've got all the. We used to have one WhatsApp group. Lloyd, Matt, and I. We now have about 26 different groups. Some of them are not operating, and some of them are for the tournament. But lots of conversations going on within those at the moment about where we go with here. So we want to set up a league next year on the islands. So I think Lloyd posted something about that yesterday. There are invitations for players to come in from abroad to participate in that, by the way, because you can come in and play for the 3-month window. So that's something I think quite exciting for people to go and play in the inaugural league in that sense. We'd love to do another Outrigger Cup. We'd like it to be an annual event or a biannual event. So we're already working on looking at next year, doing the same thing again, whether it's the same teams or it's new teams or a mixture. Are we now going to put a foot down a bit in terms of recruitment and finding players? So Jack, who came in, he actually paid to join our staff. That was part of the crowdfunder. He was like our kit man and did a half a dozen jobs for us during the tournament. So he has this Football Legionnaires website, and he's aware of people around the world that might have the Marshallese heritage. So we're going to step that up. We're creating stuff around that so we can more easily identify players to bring in. So I would expect our squad going forward to be considerably stronger. So when you take it from the perspective of we almost, we went toe to toe with two FIFA nations and we could have got a draw or even a win against one of them, shows where we could be with this. On islands, keep developing it in the schools. Now there's going to be kids with role models, the first ever Marshallese soccer role models. More of this in the community in the US, for example. Women's team, developing that, playing our first ever women's game, we hope, be it futsal 11-a-side. And trying to find sponsors, trying to get AFC, CONCACAF or whatever it is, Confederation membership. You see, the list is quite long.
It's extensive, and none of these things take anything under months to happen either.
Yeah, although that is mostly the case, but we also understood from this tournament that once you apply yourself to it and you believe and you got the passion, you got the people to work and do something. Sometimes it's incredible what you can achieve against all odds. And there's no greater odds than what these young men did when they went out and played. I would have had them losing to a pub team the week before. I'm not joking.
Let's hone in on that. There is no greater odds than establishing and delivering the first international fixture for a nation.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but like I said, it's step by step. All the things are step by step. It's our first ever kids session. When I went into one of the schools and I did a session with a group of girls, and none of them had ever kicked or headed or whatever a ball before in their entire lives, and that's what an honour. how grateful you can be for being involved in something like that, and seeing the fun they had, and knowing that some of those girls then would go on and play that, and possibly play for the national team one day. These are all magical things. They're all wins. And I think we're in a lovely position that we're not typical football today. A lot of it's destroyed by the money and the power of it, and the expectation and the over the top, and the disconnection with the fan and everything else. This is a project where we're just like pure, everything is a development. It's got a beauty and an art to it, if you see what I mean.
There's a meaning to it. And I think that's what's lost in football at the highest levels today, is where is the meaning, or where can you find your meaning? Because a lot of it is just the same, and this is going into different topics, but it all matters. And at the end of the day, the connection with our teams and our clubs is what we want to feel. So when football has a meaning, that's what makes it special for people, and at the end of the day, that's what you've managed to achieve.
I will say something here, and this, in the lead up to playing the first game, our social media went absolutely bonkers, right? We had about 1 million impressions in 4 days, I think. And we got followed by Seville Football Club and half the MLS and the Northern Ireland national team. But thousands of, let's say, use the word ordinary, nobody's ordinary, but ordinary football fans, right? And there was this sense that we were a team that wasn't just representing the Marshall Islands. It was like a lot of people's favourite second team, right? So we are a global team as well. I'm not trying to be cheesy or a bit pretentious with that, but we represent the Marshall Islands, but we also represent this sort of pure joy of football. And come on the journey with us. Yeah, buy the shirt. It would be lovely. It would help us. But, help us with that. But please follow the journey, be part of it. Tune in online and watch it. Someday, people come up to us in the US and come down from wherever in the US to watch the game and said, we love what you're doing. And we're like, well, it's unbelievable you've come to support us. I don't know what we've never played a game before, and you're supporters, and you bought a shirt. How many teams? I mean, I support Northampton Town. I buy the shirt once every 10 years. Guys who've bought the shirt and never even seen us before. So yeah, I think we've got that sense of international community as well as a Marshallese community.
Yeah, and I've said in this podcast a few times before, like, when a lot of people hear the word heritage, they think of, like, can be different things. A lot of people think of, like, castles and old buildings and, stuffy old archive rooms and libraries and things like that. But heritage is also modern, because at the end of the day, heritage is what connects us in the present with the past, and it's what's going to connect things in the future with us in the past as well. And heritage is created every day by different people, and this is why you're on this podcast right now, is because you've created heritage. You've created a heritage touch point for people to look back on in the future, because you've had this first national team game, and that's history.
When we got followed by Northern Ireland, which was very nice, because federations are funny about that sort of stuff. Barely anyone will follow you, whatever. But it's not that big a deal. But great, they put the nose out there and said, we're going to follow you. Northern Ireland is one of the world's oldest football federations. You talk about heritage, I think they're 1860s or something, right? So we said thank you to a football federation that's been around since the 1860s, recognising the heritage of a brand new national team that's just only started its journey now. That means an awful lot to us, because you're recognising us. We're part of the same journey you're on.
It's authenticity. It's a domino effect. I wonder if they knew that in 100+ years' time they'd be welcoming the Marshall Islands national team into existence. It's incredible to think about, but you're absolutely right. That's what a heritage is, and you guys have went and created it. There's not a lot of people who can say that they've managed to do that, and I think the world is wishing the Marshall Islands the best in the future journey that you guys go on.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to play us after this, to be honest, because I think the bookies were probably going to say 30-0. I'm sure somewhere there was one of those, I'm not a betting man, but I'm sure there was all that stuff about how many goals. So I think after this, people would be like, well, because anything less than that score would be a humiliation, I suppose. So,
Justin, thank you very much for coming on. This has been an absolutely exceptional conversation. Of course, thank you very much to all of our listeners for tuning into this episode as well. I hope this has given you an insight into the journey that the Marshall Islands national team has been on to even just exist before we talk about playing matches and getting results. Of course, if you have any questions about this episode, or if you want to recommend an episode yourself, you can DM us on X, that's @_footyheritage, or you can email us at hello@footballheritage.co.uk as well. That'll do us for tonight. Justin, say goodbye.
Thanks very much, and thanks for any interest that anybody's got. Please follow us. Please be part of our journey. The more people that are part of our journey, magic happens. This is what's happened by people being part of that journey. It's enabled this to happen. You're all part of the story if you want to be part of the story.
Yes, that is one of the magic parts of it as well. It's very true, and obviously we'll put links out on the show notes to this episode and on our social media pages for the jersey as well. Until next week, it's goodbye from me as well. Goodbye.